Hi, I'm the Weird Christian. And in society right now, you can tell that a lot of things are being shaken. Our concepts of many things, what it means to be a nation, who we are as people, how to relate to society and the state, and so forth, are all being discussed. And many of our long assumptions that we've had, we have to reevaluate them, whether they're really true, honorable, and strong. There hasn't been, we've gone in society quite a bit away from what we considered to be stable understandings of law and of society and of culture and being nations in themselves. So this is something to really discuss and to be aware of. We have all sorts of ideas now about what a nation is or what it isn't, how to relate to people and truth and so forth. And I try to use truth in order to understand the world. And I defined it as being consistent, eternal, and omnipresent, which means you use those premises and you determine for your search of truth. You find out if a statement is made or if an idea is presented, you use those premises in question form to decide whether you actually can find truth in what is being stated. So it's a process of using those premises of consistency, whether it is internal and whether it is omnipresent. Science uses truth in order to find out the science of things in the universe, like what are the natures of stars, how planets orbit, because they use the idea that what is true on Earth can be used to determine what's going on in the heavens. And so you can determine the orbits of a planet or what it's made out of, what the, from lights and that it's giving off and so forth. You can determine what a star is made of and all sorts of things by using truth. Consistency is your premises consistent, your theology, your theory consistent? Is it eternal, which means in all ages, even beyond the age of time? There's an age of time and there's an age without time. If you know anything about like a Big Bang theory or any philosophy. So, ages are about a definable quality. So, but anyway, and you can, which eternal is about ages, which are definable. So we have ages or eternity, and we also have omnipresent, which means everywhere, and even places that don't have space, which is kind of hard to use for the term everywhere. But so I use truth in order to determine what I'm talking about, and I try to use that. And you can determine a lot of things using truth, and you can build assumptions that a lot of people haven't used, because people tend to not question things using truth, and so they get some ideas and premises and axioms and things like that and just build and just go with it before they've actually determined whether they're true. And then people build on those axioms, the premises that may be not true, and they just keep building these superstructures. And our society has done that for a lot of things. And so we have to, in this time of being, it's shaken because things are being tested, and some things are not holding up. We thought they would hold up, but they're not really holding up. They're not really being true. And that's why you have all sorts of people talking about, when they lose confidence in an authority, they tend to throw out everything that they consider that the authority to have said, and therefore they believe in all sorts of. They may pick up another authority or another idea and use that for their truth. So without really learning the basis of how to think, and you get the basis of how to think from truth. And you have to start somewhere. You have to start with some kind of a basic axiom in order to figure out where you're at. And I use truth for my axiom. So that's kind of a long rambling about truth. And so I'm going to be saying some things that I've already had ideas, and I've already presented ideas. And so, you just have to look at my ideas and try to figure out truth, because I've kind of gone through the process, but it's a laborious process to get to there. It's not really laborious, but if you're not there, you may not, it may seem like I'm jumping through ideas, but hopefully it'll come across in a cohesive, concise, and coherent ideas what I'm going to be presenting. And we're going to be talking about law, and even the very premises of what we think is law, and why and how is law used. Some people, I was talking to one person, anytime you use the word law, she just assumed that it was evil. Anything that had law in it was evil. I'm not sure how she jumped to that conclusion. But to me, a law, and we'll get into the definitions of law in just a sec. I went to Google, and it has good definitions. We can start on those things. And common law, it's interesting to talk about common law, people understanding the common law. I just recently learned that, well, I kind of knew before, but I was reintroduced to the idea when I was talking to a friend of mine. And I realized, everybody uses that understanding of common law. I don't think it was used, in the 1200s, but it was used. It's used now, and so we'll have to get to that too. And a lot of things, like Alberta. I'm in Alberta. I've got my Alberta shirt, APP, and Alberta flag. Alberta Prosperity Project, which is trying to educate people. I'm a member, but I'm not the member. I'm not the one who espouses, what APP is about. I'm just saying it's a good resource to actually know what's going on and to get some ideas and understand what it is to be a nation and what it is to be an Alberta nation. So if you're looking for that, you can look into that. And they're doing a petition to have a referendum so that they can form their own nation, because the Confederation is just not working for the people of Canada, and especially for Alberta, really. I don't think it works for anybody, though some people think it does. But anyway, but here I'm going to be talking about law. Now, one thing in this picture right off the bat that I had here, it's got a picture of scales. And they say while we weigh, some people say that this is, originally I don't think, I could go back into history of where these ideas of scales came from. In fact, I will, but they're not really what people think they are. If you actually look into the scale thing and this idea of justice that they have. But they present the idea nowadays that the scales is to weigh, the pros and cons of something so you can make a judgment and then make a decision. That's why they say they throw the scales on now. But the scales is actually based on a philosophy. It's called Zoroastrianism. And before that, Egypt used it many times too. And they'd weigh the heart of the pharaoh against some object, I don't know. And if the pharaoh was lighter than that, then everybody would go to, all pharaoh's subjects would be going to the heaven or whatever where the Pharaoh is. And if it was heavy, then he would be not a very good Pharaoh, and he would be going to a bad place, and all his subjects would be going to a bad place. So they would weigh his heart at his death and determine whether he was had a light heart or a heavy heart, and whether you were going to hell or heaven. That's kind of where the scale thing is really based into an idea. And you can see that in Zoroastrian thought. That's basically Zoroastrian thought, where you weigh your good deeds and your bad deeds. And if you have more good deeds than bad deeds, you go to heaven. If you have more bad deeds, you go to hell, or some kind of purgatory, or some kind of thing like that, until you work your way back up to heaven. There's all that kind of idea into it too. So yeah, there's many stories. We have a Christmas Carol is basically a Zoroastrian tale of how Scrooge is being weighed down by all his bad deeds, and then he turns a corner and he starts doing good deeds, and his heart becomes light as a feather, and he is going to the heavenly places then. So that's a very Zoroastrian tale, and it's so there's lots of these kind of ideas in our ideas. Now, it's not a biblical idea about law. You don't weigh your bad deeds and good deeds in the biblical sense, though lots of Christians think that that's how it's done. And there's, especially in the Reformation, they say that, there's a bunch of bad deeds and they have to be done away with in some way so that people can go to heaven. But that's not, from my understanding, not what's going on at all. It's about it's about loyalty. Are you loyal to God? Are you loving God? Or are you going the other direction, being loyal to yourself and making your own universe? So you're a rebel, or you're a person that wants to love God and love others. So that's what's going on, and God just decides, okay, if you decided to go with him and love him, then he will accept you, and you confess your sins and repent and follow his way, which is for forgiveness. You forgive other people, and you live a life of forgiveness and love and acceptance with people. But it doesn't mean that you cannot judge people. You just aren't hypocritical in your judgment. There's a whole bunch of things. Like, I know. I'm covering a lot of stuff here. What about it says don't judge or you'll be judged, and so forth, and all that kind of stuff. But really, Jesus was concerned about hypocritical thought. So if you're a hypocrite and you judge, so you tell somebody to do something, but you don't care about doing it yourself, but they have to do it. It's kind of, that's a hypocrite. So the idea in biblical law is basically, it's about forgiveness. That it's not about appeasement. It's not about judging weights of deeds against another deeds, so forth. If you understand the book of Job properly, it makes a very big point about that. Karma is not how you get into the heavens. If you do good deeds, it's not mean that you're a good guy. If you get bad things happen to you, it doesn't mean you're done bad deeds and so forth. It's where you want to, how you want to treat people, how you want to treat God. Do you love him, or are you going to go your own way? Do you want to help people, or do you want to just store up your own stuff and not think about other people? So forth. This is what the Bible is about. That's what the gospel is about, is do you want to love people, or do you want not to love people? If you don't want to love people, well, and you just want to admit that you're the greatest guy and you can judge people and hypocritically and all that, and do your life and have your own truth, then you're going to go to the place of judgment where God sends people that don't want to love people and don't want to love God. But if you want, if you want to love, it's the direction you go in. It's the loyalty you go in. If you love God, then you have loyalty to him, and you have commitment to him, you have thankfulness from him, then you will go to heaven. He doesn't have to deal with a bunch of bad deeds that you do. You just have to decide whether direction you're going, what the direction you're going. So anyway, that's totally different than most churches, what they'll teach. but this is what I've learned anyway. So that's something that, you'll say, no, that's not how it goes. And Jesus died, took the punishment for God's sins, and he had to take all this stuff. Anyway, I don't believe any of that stuff. Anyway. But, so I'm just saying the basic point here is this idea of weighing out things. You do bad things, so you get punished. That's what this thing's about, this scale thing. And we'll get into that later, rather than in the biblical sense. You really don't think of it in that way. You're either loyal or you're not loyal. You're either a traitor or you're part of the kingdom. So that's how they think. They don't think about, you've done this many good deeds and you've done that many bad deeds or whatever. They don't think that. That's not the way the Bible thinks. Okay, so anyway, but it shows this court thing, and really that's not a biblical understanding. In essence, it's not a biblical understanding of law and justice. That's the what would I call it, the point of the whole thing I'm trying to say. That is not what justice is about, but that's what we think justice is about because of our understanding of different things. Anyway, so I'm going to just go to law here. And law, it says, is, let's see here, I'm just going to move this a bit. I guess that'll be good there. Okay. All right. Okay. It doesn't make any difference. Okay. Law, I just went on Google and just said law definition. And I think it sets up a pretty good understanding of it. Law is a system of rules and guidelines established and enforced by controlling authority, such as a government or a sovereign power, to regulate behavior, maintain order, and uphold justice within a community or society. Its core definition: law refers to a set of rules of conduct prescribed or formally recognized as binding, often enforced through penalties or sanctions. It governs actions between individuals, organizations, and the state. Yeah, it says that, but usually, it can be like if you're having agreements, they have a set of rules in the agreements that are binding. But usually in life, they don't tell you a bunch of rules. They just tell you about what can go wrong, and then what do you deal with it when it goes wrong. Basically, that's what the way the law is used. And then if it goes wrong, you get penalties or sanctions. So, but it doesn't really tell you usually how to live, what you have to do here and there. Though in the governments want to, in this day and age, tell you how to live, and they want to have more control of your life. They want to have where you live, where you can go, how you can work, what you can say, and in essence, what you can think. So they want to control everything, but usually law is not in such a manner. Though even in the Bible, I have to admit that it's about not coveting. So that's about thinking about things. So it's about thinking. So, but it's fairly free. You're just not supposed to think about. And in fact, the basic premise of the law in the Bible is to love God and to love others. So when you love other people, you're either committed to them and you're trying to be thankful for them, or you're trying to see how you can be of service to them to help them have a better life. So that's usually what it means to love people, is to do that. You don't want to do things that are harmful to people, but you may see a need and then you'll fulfill that need. That's usually what they're talking about in the Bible, about interceding and seeing the need and then having somebody rise up to help fulfill that need, to help people live a good life and have a peaceful life and a productive life and a purposeful life. That's what it usually talks about in the Bible. So you can have that, but governments are starting to say, well, you have to have right think, and it has to be our way of thinking or no way of thinking. And if you're not having our truth, you're hateful, or you're a bigot, or you're racist, or they'll start calling you names, not necessarily dealing with the issues that you're talking about. They'll just name call, which can be fun, like insulting people. It can be fun. You can, sometimes that's what they do in stand-up comedy is really, you maybe insult yourself, you insult people, and it can be fun. It can be a joke. It can be taken with some humor, or it can be taken viciously, and you have people, lashing out viciously. Anyway, so the key elements: enforceability. Laws are backed by authority and can be enforced through courts or other legal institutions. And regulation of behavior. Laws define what it is permissible, prohibited, or required in social, economic, and political life. So that can happen. Like let's say on the road, it's recommended to go a certain speed so that won't cause a problem in corners or stopping or all that kind of stuff, so that traffic can, be reasonably done, so that people be able to get to A to B without killing each other, basically, and or causing serious damage to one another. So that's part of the law system, regulating behavior. And sources. Laws may come from statutes, legislative acts, judicial decisions, case in common law systems, regulations, constitutional provisions, or customary practices. So this is how a lot of the ways laws can be done. And you have different cultures. Usually they have different principles on which to establish, or premises that they establish their law systems on. So, and then people live under those premises. And that's why many times you have to start at the very beginning about what kind of God you're going to worship, and then you develop the law system on that. Now, some people say, well, we'll just use secular law system. Well, I think the only secular law systems I know are communist system, where the government is all powerful law and can make their own laws, whatever they are, for the benefit of all people, but maybe not for you at all. So they have their own premises, their own religion, their own God, which may be the state as their God, the dictates of the state. In the American Constitution and system, they had Unitarian and deism as the main drivers of their state constitution and so forth. Had a lot of different, in most law systems, they have a lot of different ideas, but there's religion in every group of law systems. Now, people think that there isn't. Oh, we have a secular law system. Well, I don't really know of any law system that I would really call secular. Because I call communism and socialism as actually a religious system. Depending on what kind of God. Usually maybe they're a system that believes that they are a God, basically, and they can make their own laws. So mankind is a God, or the society is a God, or some government is God, or something like that, and they can tell everybody what to do. So they have their God. So it depends what your God is, and you base your law system on that God. And that's how all law systems are made. And you have to have laws to basically have relationships that work in some manner between people and societies and institutions, what it says here. So types of law. There's public law, governs the relationship from between individuals and the state, constitutional law and criminal law and administrative law. Yeah, there are types of law basically governing different, having different purposes. So that's something to be aware of. So, and there's private law, which addresses disputes between individuals or private entities, contract law, property law, tort law. There's philosophical views of law, and this is what really sets the precedent of what the law, or the premises of what builds the law system. The Western societies, none of them are secular law. They're all built on, a certain legal, religious system. This idea of secular law, it doesn't really make sense. But anyway, there's legal positivism. John Austin. Law is the command of a sovereign backed by threats of sanctions. Okay. There's natural law. Okay, Thomas Aquinas presented this. And, when people are actually trying to figure out what natural law is, it tends to change depending on who's defining it, because it's not really well defined. That doesn't have a real definition. But here we have this. Law is a rational order promoting the common good and grounded in morality. Okay, so you can have a common good. That's basically communism. They have a common good, and it may not be good for the individual, but for the common good. So, for the common good, we'll get rid of you because you got the wrong narrative, right? So this kind of thing, the natural law, and then it says grounded in morality. But what morality? That's the thing. So it's very vague, and it's if you don't say what morality, it could be animal morality, or it could be hedonism, or sacrificing people all the time. What kind of morality are you talking about? Or might is right morality. Like, it's not very well, and rational order. Well, law is a rational order. I don't know. I've seen people use insanity as a means of rational order. So all these words are not very well defined, and not natural law can be almost anything, because it's not grounded in any particular idea. It's grounded in whoever's stating the law, what their ideas are, what they consider rational order, what they consider the common good, what they consider is morality. So I'm not really impressed with natural law. Here's interpretive theory. And this one here, John Austin, it's basically, tyranny, I think. And he calls it legal positivism. And law is commanded by a sovereign backed by threats of sanctions or whatever. And to me, it's basically, that can be tyranny easily enough. Like a despot running around threatening people with sanctions all the time, or different things. So, but they call it positivism or positivism, something like that. And then interpretive theory by Ronald Dworkin. Law is an interpretive concept aimed at achieving justice within a legal tradition. And yeah, so you have a tradition, and it's basically you interpret law to what is the status quo of the time, or your tradition. And that can mean anything, depending what your tradition is. So it's all these law systems are very, well, this one's probably, John Austin is probably the least vague. it comes out very much saying, except it uses this name positive. I guess being a tyrant and a dictator is positive. I go positive. That's a funny name for being a dictator and a tyrant, but okay. It's positive. Anyway, purpose. Law ensures stability, resolves conflicts, protects rights, and facilitates peace coexistent in society. Well, that is a goal. It can do that. Okay. You can have laws, they may think that the way you have stability is you stop any progress. You may, kill anybody that contradicts what you have and, put everybody in a grave. And then you have a very stable society, a grave society. So, all these things can be, you have to be very careful with it, because it says resolves conflicts. How do you resolve conflicts? Okay, that person, you disagree with him, so I kill him. That resolves the conflict. Protects rights. This is another thing. Like, what does it mean by protects rights? Like some people say, and I was listening to Bruce Pardon with Nadine Wellwood, and they were talking about, Bruce is an amazing mind. He thinks very straightforward. And Nadine was mentioning the concept of the right to life. And it's in, many it's in the American documents. You have the right to life, property, and liberty, and so forth. Okay, what does it mean, the right to life? Does it mean that if you're dying, that you have the right to have the whole state keep you alive somehow, no matter what costs? Is that forcing everybody to kowtow to your right to life and have a whole society doing that? Is that what it means by right to life? It can mean that, or it can mean that people cannot take your life. So he made a very big distinction between the idea of rights is, you have a right to not hurt other people, basically. So it's basically, the right is to not be a burden on other people, to not be a pain to other people, to not be try to enforce your opinions and your wants onto other people, so forth. That's, one is an eternal thing, one is a limiting thing, the other one is a grabbing thing. So you have to understand, you have to, that term can mean either of those things. So it's not really a very good term to use unless you maybe you just forget about it and use a different understanding of it to present that term. So, these are the things with words. You have to understand what it means. Like, what are the rights? And it says facilitates peaceful coexistence in society. People can say you're doing a peaceful coexistence, but what does that mean? You can't go anywhere? That's very peaceful. You know what I mean? So you have to understand what these mean. You have to determine what these, you have to make sure that people understand what's going on here and have a basic first premises of what you want, kind of idea of what it is to have a life in a society. While definitions vary across legal traditions and philosophies, the central idea remains: law is a structured system of rules that binds members of a society and is upheld by institutional authority. And that is good. And here he texts that they maybe have different ideas, but law is basically that. That's true enough. That's very good. And that's, So it's not a four-letter word, as one person thought it was. Law is a structured system of rules that binds members of society and is upheld by institutional authority. And the biggest thing is, if the culture has the same culture, then you can make a law system that works within that culture, and that will help keep. And then you have laws that help remind people what the culture is. I can consider it that way. Let's see what do we have here. Okay, now we have common law. Now, I always assumed that what common law, like more of the idea of what the Magna Carta was, and it was basically the word common law says the meaning of law in the word. It's a law common to all. So everybody is under the same law, common law. But that is not what they use now in the British system. They use it more of the law commonly used, which means it can be used, you can have whatever society has for a law system is their common law of their system. So, so it's in the term that they use, it can be applied to any law system. The communist could be common law of the communist system. The tyrant could be a common law of the tyrant system. And we'll just go into the definition they use here. Common law is a legal system where laws are developed through judicial decisions and precedents rather than solely through written statutes. It is based on, so right away you're seeing that this law, the way they define it, is not upholding to written laws. So it's already saying right in the first sentence of this common law definition that a written law, it doesn't have any power over common law, this common law. Okay. That's a bad start right off the bat, as far as I'm concerned. It is based on the principle of status decisis, meaning courts follow established rulings from previous similar cases to ensure consistency and predictability in legal outcomes. Now, this is something they say to justify this status, principle of status decisis, or stare decisis. But that's not what you get from common. If you followed written laws, you would get consistency and predictability in legal outcomes. But when you have laws based on judicial decisions and precedent, then you don't get consistency and predictability. You get decisions from whatever judge that you get from. So it's basically a system of whatever's the status quo, whatever's the big thing that's happening at the time, whatever in fashion is the way they define this common law. Really, that's so sad. But they're pretending it's going to cause consistency and predictability in legal outcomes. Okay, sure it is. With this definition of common law, yeah, it's going to happen. In common law system, judges interpret laws and create legal principles through their rulings, which then serve as binding precedent for future cases until the next judge decides that doesn't work. And then he'll make his own precedents. So, and create legal principles. Well, if you don't have to, why don't you just create the legal principles, follow those, like right off the bat. And then you don't have to create any more. If you make good legal principles, just follow principles rather than following interpretations or opinions of judges. And here is the justification. This approach allows the law to evolve gradually over time, adapting to new social, political, and ethical contexts without requiring legislative changes. What they're essentially saying here is the judges have total control over what is going on in society. If they think that society should be a certain way, they can say, and if it's the fad, they can make that law. It's like, what? That's the law system we have, common law. Oh, that's really good. And this is what they tell, first thing they tell people. I was just talking to a fellow who was in a law course. And he says, yeah, this is what they tell. And, okay. And I looked it up and I thought, oh, okay. That's what they tell. Well, they've just turned common law into no law at all. An opinion. Common law is used in countries with historical ties to England, including Canada and the United Kingdom, United States, Australia, and India. In Canada, common law also refers to common law relationships where unmarried couples living together in married-like relationships are recognized as spouses under the provincial family laws. Yeah, so that's just a special case. So the reason why we have this idea of common law that we're using now is because we have the Westminster Parliamentary and Court System. And that is based on the Westminster Confession. When I've read the Westminster Confession, it considers authority above the law, the written law, any kind of law. It uses law as a tool. They can use law or not use law, whatever law it wants. And it also allows for secret courts, which means where the people that you're making a decision on do not have the right to actually represent themselves or to be listened to in court. And the decision is made on that, on what the court says. That was in the Westminster Confession. It has many other things in it, but these are two premises or principles of the Westminster Confession in its presenting of law and authority. There's other things too. They also use insanity as method of reasoning, which means two things that aren't the same are considered the same. Okay. So that is the Westminster system. Now, there was two law systems that were presented before that were trying to counteract this philosophy of system. And it was the Henry Law of 1100 and the Magna Carta of 1215, which they're in total opposition to Westminster Parliamentary and Court System. Okay. The Westminster Parliamentary and Court System is based on Calvin's theology. He's a fellow. John Calvin was a theologian, a reformer theologian in France. So lots of people love him. I think he was. I read the document and I call it an abortive, awful document. It's just like if you actually criticize a thing, it teaches irresponsibility and not all sorts of might is right. It's just a piece of not very. It's more like just the dictator's law, right? Anyway, so I just thought I'd talk about law. Now in Canada, so we've done this. We've been using this Westminster Parliamentary Court System and they've redefined what common law was from before, like in Magna Carta time. It was the common law was considered the law being the same for all, no matter what status you have, whether you're the king or whether you're a peasant on the street. You used the same law. And you had the same rights. Now, you didn't have the same responsibilities. So that's another case. That's another issue. But you had the same rights under the law. You're all treated equally under that law, a common law. That's what the term means in its original form. It doesn't mean a law that is some judge's opinion that can be changed and interpreted any way he wants to form a society that he wants. Because courts are very important for society. Courts are the backbone of society. So if you have a law system that can be whatever it wants to be, to whoever it wants to be, and it has no, it can't be accountable to written laws. It making its own laws doesn't really follow any written laws or statutes or principles. It makes it all up on the fly. And then it's supposed to be a wonderful law system. I don't think so. The further we get from this type of common law, the better. Because this is not common law, I consider common law at all. Common law is where all are under the same law. Even judges can be charged with criminal decisions or whatever. They are not escaping from the law. And even the prime minister is beholden to the law. All are beholden. Cops are beholden. Everyone is beholden. So, there's not a special class of people that have no, you can't charge them under the law. So that's how I understand it. It's different. I can see it's very much different than what's presented here. I think the way they have this law, common law, presented here, is basically a piece of garbage as far as I'm concerned. That's just, it looks like a piece of garbage. A bunch of opinions. I have my truth, you have your truth. And wherever the truth shall meet. We go east and west, and but we have both truths. We're going both the opposite direction. That's kind of what we got here. And that's the Westminster Parliamentary and Court System. So, there we go. If you want to talk about secret courts, they've been using secret courts just lately. Like in BC, they didn't tell these people that they were giving all their land to the Indians until they already decided that it was Indian land, that their house was on Indian land, their business was on Indian land. Nobody knew until the decision had already been made. That's secret courts. That's a secret court. That's what they were using. And they were using the Crown of BC to do that. So, to me, basically, they're a lawless. When you can use any law you want and define it anyway, and you don't beholden to written laws, you just decide whatever you want. The reason why even laws and written things were written out in the first place is because people changed their opinion or their desires. Like even for writing, the very reason why writing first started in the cuneiform it was doing was because people were reneging on their contracts. They were saying that they were supposed to get more and you were supposed to get less. And they said that was the original agreement. So they said, well, no, then they started writing out agreements and they had a date on them and a signature. And then they couldn't say that anymore. Well, here they're trying to get rid of that again. Precedent rather than solely through written statutes. It's the same thing. And when you do a law like that, you're basically causing the opposite of a society that has peace, I tell you right now. And prosperity. You're doing the opposite of that. You're breaking down everything. You're having no trade, you can't do anything. People will have resentment and it's just bad. Anyway, that's our system. That's what we got. And that's why Alberta wants to be out of it. We don't want to be part of that system. And if you were smart, you wouldn't want to be in that system either. Because it's not very nice. It's really vicious and self-centered and egocentrical. So anyway, that's my story about law. I hope you enjoyed it. Or maybe you didn't. I don't know. maybe I'm just using my thoughts and try to be logical. Like trying to use truth and consistent. So may God bless you. May God keep you. I know I say lots of things that people don't agree with and think other things about. And as you can see, I don't agree with any of the law system that we have in Canada and the way they teach it. So, but may you be blessed and may God bless you and keep you and his face shine upon you. Amen.